My name is Johanna Loacker, and I'm representing the invertebrate zoology collection staff at the California Academy of Sciences. And today I'll be discussing how we implemented and refined direct and indirect transcription workflows as part of a grant period. And hopefully our experiences can kind of guide your upcoming digitization processes. So as one of 19 US institutions involved in the documenting marine biodiversity through digitization of invertebrate collections grant, we'll call it DigIn for short, we contributed to building a new support network for for invertebrate collections. This network has facilitated the broader access of invertebrate specimen data, and as well as the sharing of knowledge and resources between invertebrate collections. We benefited greatly from LA County's workflows, and I know they're going to be talking about that later. So highly recommend going to see that. So our collections at the Academy, where our target was 60,000 curated non-molluscan marine records. Mollusks make up approximately half of our targets or our holdings, so this target is a sizable portion of our collections. And just to note that our invertebrate collection does not include insect taxa. So the extremely broad taxonomic scope of this grant, as well as a heterogeneous collection in various states of curation, made our workflows difficult to plan. And our small but very mighty team on this slide, this is the extent of our invertebrate collection staff. We have 3 permanent staff, and then Hannah Beck was our full-time digitization technician position that was funded for our grants. If you do the math, all 4 of us can't digitize 15,000 records each, so we needed to be creative in how we used our resources in getting to our goal. Our standard direct data entry workflow mirrors the approach that we used before the grant period, with one exception that transcribers now enter data directly into Excel sheets instead of entering data directly into the database. This is beneficial as permanent staff can now review and quality control data before it is uploaded, and it also restricts direct editing rights in our database to prevent miscellaneous deletions or errors. It's also a little bit more accessible for new transcribers to enter data into a familiar space like Excel versus specify forms. I briefly mentioned our transcription rate. That is with our DigIn technician as well as some volunteers. I'll talk about that a little bit more later at the end of the presentation. And to just briefly summarize our label transcription workflow, we created a Scrappy, so to speak, a resourceful scanning workflow with 2 main goals. Efficiently using volunteer hours to support our DigIn technician, and generate label scan images that can be used for offsite and direct transcription. So as I said, to briefly summarize, I'll get into a little bit more detail later. Scanning in orange and label transcription in green. We initially tested a combined workflow with volunteers where they did scanning of labels as well as skeletal data entry, but that proved to be inefficient as volunteers struggled with the dual tasks. Separating scanning and transcription allowed volunteers to focus on a singular task, which boosted efficiency and satisfaction. So for scanning specimen labels, we had 10 volunteers during the grant period that created label scan images in 2 separate fluid collection rooms and to avoid moving specimens between the floors of our building. We also had a dry scanning station set up in an office just outside of our dry collections room. Each workstation featured a Caesar document scanner, and in our wet collection we used laptops for ease of use and mobility. Placeholder jars, which unfortunately aren't in this folder or these images, but are bright orange, made reshelving more accurate and quickly for our volunteers. And scanning time varied. Quicker for section with fewer labels and longer for lots with vials, which took a lot of time to remove the tiny labels out for more legible scans. And I don't have time to go in the depths of our label scanning workflow, but you can always come talk to me or contact me later. So after scanning, image files and Excel sheets were sent to both volunteers and our transcriber when she was working from home. This remote transcription was advantageous, especially for a remote volunteer who appreciated the flexibility to contribute to our project at her schedule and her pace. Since volunteers weren't physically handling specimens, keeping them engaged by other means was crucial for retention. Volunteer survey feedback indicated that support, education, and a positive attitude from their supervisor was crucial for their satisfaction. So, however, managing volunteers had challenges, particularly with asynchronous error correction. Label images did help permanent staff quality control and spot errors, and these label images will be included in the collection object record and specify for future condition reporting and error checking later on. But despite volunteers handling most label scan transcriptions, significant staff time was needed for training, pre-populating data sheets, correcting errors, image file management, and uploading data into Specify. And so this slide is a brief and small and not exhaustive selection of our various types of labels that we have both in our fluid and dry collection. And our label scanning workflow was highly iterative. When transcribers faced issues or uncertainties during the transcription process, we adjusted our label scanning workflows accordingly. And I'll just share 2 of the adjustments that we've done to deal with difficult specimen data. So to maximize speed when transcribing from our labels, transcribers did not research station or expeditionary data that was not easily accessible in our database. For labels such as this one, where just a station number is present, transcribers would use this text string in the orange box here to indicate that no further locality is found at this moment. While this choice allowed for transcribers to move more rapidly, it is generating a significant amount of staff time in the future. To produce complete records, we will need to research data on this station. We also had a separate text string for when there was no locality present at all, and that is also indicated in the locality name of our collection event record. And I would say the most significant challenge we had was dealing with specimens whose determinations did not match where they were shelved in our collection, or who had several determinations listed on labels. For label transcribers, this was problematic as they did not have the context of shelving order from just looking at a scan. To address this, we began including the taxonomic label from either the shelf in the dry collection, or the wet collection, or the drawer label in the dry collection. And this can be seen in the bottom part of the scan. We call them context labels. There's number of specimens, preservative, and then that determination, which often aren't present on our historic labels. Unique identifiers were assigned by scanners as well, and the QR code is embedded with a unique identifier that helped us speed up our image file renaming process. So transcribers would enter the determination from this context label into the shelved as field in their spreadsheets, which populated a text field in our specified collection object record. Printing and stuffing labels was not included in our grant workflow to maximize time spent generating records. This field will record where the specimen was last found and hopefully aid in future label stuffing and reorganization efforts. You may notice this specimen does fall outside of the scope of our grant. When we finished scanning the grant-related specimens in our collection, we utilized our volunteer workflows to scan selected areas of our mollusk collection. And so this chart summarizes our progress since the grant began. Our grant was awarded during the pandemic. So as soon as we were able to access our collections, we needed to hit the ground running. Scanners started label scanning in fall of 2021, and our DigIn technician was hired in February of 2022. This image does highlight the work of our one grant digitizer, Hannah Beck, represented in blue. She's amazing. We're very lucky to have her. And she was a former volunteer in our collection. And so hiring volunteers is beneficial as training time is reduced, and they can just start as soon as possible. And it is great to pay our people who work there. And transcription weights did fluctuate over time and gradually decreased as we reserved the more complicated section like formalin preserved specimens for the later periods of our grants. And here are some of our totals and rates for our 2 transcription workflows. The 40,000 records produced during these 2 workflows will supplement a third volunteer-based workflow on Zooniverse that unfortunately I'm running out of time and will not be able to talk about today. But our findings indicated that for our collections, direct data entry was significantly faster, nearly doubling the rate of label transcription workflow. As I'll discuss, only looking at digitization rates can be misleading and not the only factor when determining a workflow for your collections. So comparing transcription rates can be challenging, as previously digitized data was spread across our collection, changing the amount of data that needed to be entered. While our volunteers transcribed faster when working directly from specimens, the workflow that they were doing often only included entering the collection object data. Variations in transcription speed were influenced by the complexity of taxa and the curation needs, and this can lead to discrepancies that don't fully reflect process efficiency. Lastly, digitization rates overlook the essential contributions of permanent staff. And I'm running out of time, so I won't be able to go over all of these considerations. Oh, cool, well then I have time. Sorry, everyone. So as many collections push to digitize their specimen data and seek external funding to support their staff, hopefully some of these questions can guide your planning. Each collection is different, and each workflow should be different depending on the needs of your collection and those who use them. Let's see. So first thing, and I think what is most important, is to define your data needs early, so you can direct your approach and your allocation of resources. While curatorial staff love to capture as much data as possible, maybe you can consider producing a higher volume of lower quality records during the grant period, with more detailed work to be done later when you actually know what you have in your collections. Consider whether your focus should be broad or a specific taxonomic or geographic area. And so for us, the both direct and indirect workflows demanded substantial staff time for pre-curation, management, engagement, and quality control. This time, although hard to quantify, is significant. So plan for more staff time than anticipated, and know that even like cutting labels takes a lot of time. And our volunteers contribute over 3,000 hours to pre-curation, scanning, and transcription. While volunteer voice workflows are valuable, they should not replace full paid time positions on future grants. Ensuring the equitable museum field means not creating barriers for those who cannot work for free. And lastly, being resourceful or scrappy means just leveraging external support networks and internal resources to achieve your goals. If you don't have an external support network, maybe you can create one. And you can achieve goals when your resources are limited. And I wanted to thank our DigIn community for supporting us, and hopefully we supported you slightly. And lastly, our DigIn volunteers, that we would not have been able to accomplish our work without them. With that, I will take any questions.
I was wondering if you've looked at the Digivol process that's been developed for using volunteers for transcribe the data.
And so, as I briefly mentioned, we had a Zooniverse transcription project that kind of ran simultaneously with these two workflows. I don't know how much I can delve into that, but we had thousands of external volunteers that transcribed our catalog cards that were scanned during the pandemic. And that also required a substantial amount of staff time. I scanned all 40,000 cards. We had to answer all the questions on Zooniverse. And then that data that we received from Zooniverse is a bit messy, and so we were actively cleaning it up as we speak. So that will eventually get pushed, as with all this data that we produced, into our Specify portal and other aggregators. But it's a great resource to use.
So can you just confirm, I don't know enough about Specify. Does Specify allow you to add an identifier for the collector?
For the collector,
Yeah.
I believe you can have put the ORCID ID on there.
Okay, just
as
to
well.
let you know, your first slide had a Thomas A. Birch. I've now just put him in Wikidata, so he's got an identifier for you if you need it.
That will be another project in the future for us, so thank you. And if you think of them later, I'm around.